Hello and welcome to Talking F1. We're a podcast from GP Grandstand that does more or less what that title says. We talk about F1. More specifically, we talk about Formula All. That means Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3 and the W Series. I'm your host Jim Kimberley, and here joining me talking F1 are the familiar faces of Thiemo Albers-Daly, the Supreme Chancellor of the F1, F2 and F3 tribes on Drive Tribe, and Jacob Phillips, who will going to be tackling W Series in this episode. We are going to continue with this slightly different format for this week again, where we focus on one series at a time, and we're going to be talking about W Series going to the Hungaroring. Wasn't really a barnstorming race, and we've seen the championship battle continue though. So how are you doing today, Jacob? And what did you think of W Series visiting Hungary?
Good afternoon, Jim. I'm doing fantastic as well. And to be honest, I was a little underwhelmed by what we saw from the Hungaroring action in W Series. To be honest, it's like I've said before, we discussed many times on the podcast, my first season watching it. I didn't manage to catch it in 2019, but so far I've been a little underwhelmed with the action. And it wasn't, biggest race, but if you look up dominance in the dictionary, you'll find that Jamie Chadwick, Hungaroring 2021, fantastic performance. She led every session, I believe, and she won by 10 seconds over title rival Alice Powell. And although it wasn't a good race, it's silver lining for the second half of the season. We've got 4 races to come. There's one point in the championship, and I think it's going to be spicier after this, but certainly not the best race out there for sure.
Oh, I would agree with that, but it's good to see the championship fight alive and well. And Thiemo, how are you doing? And what did you view on Jamie Chadwick's once again being the star of the pack in the W Series?
All right, Jim, I'm pretty good, thank you. How about yourself? And it was exactly what you kind of expect from Jamie. She didn't have the best time out in Silverstone, but she was still on the podium. And I think if it wasn't for the first race in Austria, she would have probably cleaned up nicely there as well. So she's kind of doing exactly what you'd expect her to. And it's going to be, like Jacob said, quite the spicy battle for the last 4 races of the championship if Alice wants to beat her, because at the moment she's just not putting a foot wrong, really, and getting those consistent points when she can't win, and then absolutely dominating when she can.
Yeah, it's going to be one that goes down to the wire at this rate, I think, and it's fun to see Powell, because, Jacob, I don't know if you caught up on the 2019 stuff, but Powell had a really unfortunate couple of run of races back in 2019 where she had 2 DNFs, one when she got hit by Volvend and one where she had an issue with the car. And in a championship with only 6 races, that's hugely impactful. This time around, no problems. And the problem that she does have is that W Series just seems to be very difficult to pass. She, of course, passed Volvend back at Silverstone, but at the Hungaroring, combined with the W Series cars, no DRS, it just wasn't really going to be on the cards. But Powell looked solid in second, but no chance to really catch Chadwick. Do you think that's an issue with Powell's racing or Chadwick being too fast, or where do you think the problem lays with that? Is that the Hungaroring?
I think it comes down to a combination of all. I think, you saw the performance there from Chadwick. It was very much in the maybe a different, who knows, it might have been a different story, but as dominant as Chadwick was, I think, she could have been as dominant anywhere else as well. But like you say, the Hungaroring, it's famous for, the lack of overtakes, although Hamilton proved otherwise, and we'll discuss that later. But certainly, it's the air effect as well. It's quite hot there. I'm sure the tyres get affected as well. And we've discussed it before many times, the lack of DRS there as well. So it's always going to be very hard to pass. But, it could be just this race. We go to city to overtake there. I'd assume, if there were, there's going to be some more overtakes there. So, yeah, it's a combination of all 3, I'd say. But I'd certainly have it down to saying that Chadwick just had a number anyway, and it's just a dominant performance.
Yeah, she's looking very, very, very strong at the moment. Thiemo, Chadwick, let's just one final thought on her, that she was the star of the series in 2019, and a lot of people put that down to her having the Formula 3 experience, the single-seater experience with a similar car beforehand. That seems to not be the case this year, but she still is, she's re-led the championship now. Is she just a class act amongst this field? And do you think she'll be able to join in, say, Formula 3 or Formula 2 and do as well?
I think so, to be honest. Compared to some of the drivers on the grid, she has had a more straightforward time in her career in terms of opportunities and getting to drive in not just single-seater cars, but she's in Extreme E at the moment, which is a completely different category. But again, it's good experience, and you never know what you can transfer from that into single-seaters, for example, which the drivers on the grid just might not have. So I think even if she doesn't end up winning the championship this year. I still think she'd be a comfortable second place, barring any major disasters. And I think as a result of that, maybe not F3, because it would. I don't know if that would be not a waste of a year, but maybe not the step up she would require. I'd prefer to throw her into F2 and see what happens there, because it's not like she hasn't had more of this kind of experience, and age is always a factor, which, I mean, I know we'll touch on that with F1 later, not always a guarantee with some of the older drivers, but you want to try and see her get that opportunity to get an F1 a bit sooner if that's going to happen. So I think F2 should be the where to put it for next year, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a question where W Series does live amongst this hierarchy, and I find it very difficult to know. So it'd be good to see what would happen. I like the fact they get this kind of prize money, but I would really like the idea of having a guaranteed seat, say in Formula 2 or Formula 3 the following year for the victor. But that's not the case. We did speak with Alice Powell afterwards and found out that she had a lot of understeer and quite a big vibration that she struggled with throughout the race, and ended up having quite a sore hand, from what I understood. So there's a little bit of that which might have made us struggle to overtake. But we go into the summer break, and it's weird to say that, isn't it? Going into the summer break for W Series, it feels like it's just started. And like you say, 1 point between the two of those. But I looked a little bit further down, and I was really, really excited at the prospect of who's going to take the third place in the championship. So at the moment, let's go from 7th place up. Arina Sidakova, 34 points. Fabian Volvent, 34 points. Emma Kimberley, 35 points. Sarah Moore, 36 points. And Nerea Marti in third place with 37 points. She, to me, was the standout driver, Jacob, of this round. She's been consistent throughout with P7, P7, P5, and now a third place. This teenager really looking like she's not out of place amongst all these more experienced drivers.
No, she really looked on it all weekend, and you've mentioned that famous GP Grandstand word there of consistency. You've mentioned those points finished so far. So if she continues that, then you've got to say she might be a shoo-in for that third place. I don't think she's going to challenge the top two, but yeah, it's great to see. Fantastic drive. She's very young as well, not as experienced as the front two, but certainly great. And it's great to see another name on the podium. Fantastic drive.
Yeah, the names on the podium so far has been quite a lot of them. So Sarah Moore seems to have just kind of faded a little bit as the championship's gone on. She was nowhere this time round, actually, finishing in P15 in the end. But yeah, Emma Kimberley has joined the podium. Fabian Volven's gone up twice. Sidakova, the other rookie in the academy team, and now Nerea Marti. But Chadwick and Powell always up there. Thiemo, is Marti and Sidakova, is that going to be a battle between the two of them? Who's going to be the top of the teenagers? Or is this just going to be something they'll be happy to join in and be racing this year?
I think they definitely could be up there towards the end of it. There's no reason why not if they keep doing what they've been doing. I think it's partly down to, I think, the fact that there's less pressure on them because they've got that guaranteed second season next year as part of their academy team drive. But at the same time, I feel like that's a good thing. I mean, you can still have a bad weekend and you still need to be able to bounce back. Sidakova managed to do that quite well this weekend after she put her hands up and said, yeah, Silverstone didn't go my way. It happens. And she did a solid job this time out. And Marti just didn't come out of nowhere, but she just did an exceptional job. So it'll be interesting to see where those two rank. And I think, like we were touching on earlier about where to go after W Series, if they have the 2 years guaranteed here and they keep performing like this, F3 at the very least should be where they could get into next, because there's 2 seasons where they're performing very well then. And even if they drop off maybe a little bit next season, obviously that's a big if, but it's a lot of good potential. And you think this is exactly what we want. We've got the younger drivers coming through. They're showing what they've got, and it's some good stuff, both on the podium in the first half of the season. Bring it on. Why not have one of them at least in P3?
Yeah, I think it's going to go that way as well. It's really, I know the team thing isn't really much of anything at the moment, is it? But the academy team looking pretty strong, which when you looked at it on paper, the 2 youngest rookies, you'd think might not be the team to beat. But yeah, doing really, really well.
It's one of those weekends where you just can't predict what's going to happen, Jim.
Yeah, Formula One certainly proved that. Not much overtaking in the race, and especially those top 3 just all the time. They were in a class of their own. No one going to try and get there. I think we've mooted before the idea of DRS and the necessary evil of it. I really think these cars with DRS could have had a bit more of an entertaining race, or maybe I'm being too generous on DRS, Jacob. Do you think it'd be a DRS train? We saw a little bit of that in some of the Formula 3 and in Formula 1 as well. Do you think that'd be the same in W Series, or do you think it'd actually aid the racing?
I think because, like we always say, it's a necessary evil, and we want overtakes happening more naturally, but unfortunately, we need DRS due to the dirty air effect. Some of these circuits like the Hungaroring, where overtaking is now impossible anyway. So yeah, it would lead to more DRS trains, but I certainly think it would lead to more overtakes anyway. Certainly, so far this season and in the race yesterday, there's only 2 overtakes or 2 battles I can remember. So yeah, I think it would certainly help. And they're very similar to the F3 cars, I think. Anyway, correct me if I'm wrong there, and we certainly have to get there. So I certainly think that DRS certainly couldn't help. So it certainly wouldn't harm. Sorry.
One thing I also wonder about, just as a thing there, is the tyres, because obviously F1, F2, and F3 have Pirelli, whereas WC have Hankook, and they obviously, like we see in qualifying there, they take a long time for them to get up to temperature and to do all of that. And whilst that's a good skill to learn, I wonder how much of that is hindering overtakes either early on in the race, even if it did settle down a bit after that. I wonder how much that is playing into it, and if maybe they should look into either getting a different kind of Hankook tyre or doing what all the other theories on the thing we can do and just switch to Pirelli.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily Pirelli tyres. It's more if Hankook would be told you need to have higher degrading tyres. That's the sort of the issue, isn't it? That they got these tyres which do last the entire duration. So qualifying is such a weird thing to watch because you're just constantly running these tyres over and over. There's no couple of laps and then you're in the zone and then it falls off the cliff. These cars just keep on going around like it's a practice session. That's another thing maybe that I thought when I watched a bit of the practice on Friday, that it's not very long, is it, that the drivers get out there. These cars are doing the Hungaroring in slower laps than you'll see in F1, so it's taking long to go around. Out lap plus in lap. If you want some setup changes, there's not a lot of time to go in and get that sorted. And
you need the outlap again to get it back up to speed if you can, then, because the tyres could drop off on the temperature. So
yeah, it's a bit of a funny situation, but for some of the drivers, they're going there for the first time, like their peers. So I guess it's fair in that sense. But a lot of the drivers would have visited.
I think my issue with it is F3. There's no mandatory pit stops, and qualifying as well. It's kind of, they don't have the problems that W Series do with all of that, and they still manage to make it work a lot of the time. So that is the bit that irks me, I think.
That's DRS maybe proving its value. Jacob, you touched on some of those battles as well, and one of those battles I thought was possibly, before we saw Hamilton overtake Tsunoda at least, one of the overtakes of the weekend, which was Kimberley versus Garcia. And Hungaroring, typically, if you want to overtake, it's sector 1 or nowhere. Kimberley making a move on the last few corners of the lap. I think Garcia made a bit of a mistake, didn't she, going wide? But Kimberley going through.
Yeah, I put turn 11 there, she went wide.
Yeah, turn 11. And what an absolute terrific bit of racing. We spoke with Emma Kimberley before the season started, and she said that she's a racer with balls. Did you see Kimberley's balls, Jacob, this time?
Yeah, well, I saw a proverbial balls out there on the racetrack, that's for sure. Certainly a great overtake around the last couple of corners. Like you say, you never always see an overtake around there. Admittedly, the cars are smaller than F1, so in F1, you're never in a month of Sundays where you get an overtake around there. But certainly, it was a great battle then. You certainly got to risk a lot going around the outside there. The walls are quite close in that last sector. So yeah, it was just great to see, and a nice bit of action in what was for me quite a dull race. So it certainly spiced up, and we can certainly see the talent of these drivers out there. So like you say, DRS might help them, but we certainly, like you say, you can see the talent. So yeah, it was fantastic.
That's Marta Garcia that we saw, not Belen Garcia, just to clarify with that. One of the other kind of mistakes that we saw, one of the other bits of action in a race that was low on action, was when Koyama and Abby Eaton were fighting into the Turn 2 complex. And Miki Koyama, Thiemo, in 2019, she seemed pretty damn good at overtaking. This time she did make the overtake, but she hit Abby Eaton before she got there, and quite clumsy move. She's not really impressed that much so far this season. She's got P5 at the Red Bull Ring first race, 18th place after, retired at Silverstone, and 12th this time. What's going wrong with Miki Koyama? Is she on the way out of W Series at this rate, or is she just not figuring these tracks out?
So, like I was saying in the preview to the weekend for W Series, there's a list of drivers where they needed to have a good race this weekend if they want to not only boost their confidence but also make sure that they're not on the bubble going into the second half of the season if they want to be there next year, and Miki Kayama is one of them. And I still think she is after this weekend. It was an improvement over the last couple of races, but given, well, as you just said, there was a retirement in an 18th place. It's not exactly saying an awful lot. And yeah, in 2019, like when I was watching the Driven documentary to remind myself of 2019, and then having a look at some of the races there, she seemed pretty good, and I was quite looking forward to seeing what she was going to do this year. And she's just not really been anywhere. It's I don't know quite what's going on there, because again, it's an example where this isn't her first season, and you can't even really use it as an excuse at the moment because Marti and Sidakova are doing so bloody well. So it's just a weird kind of no man's land, and I don't quite know what's going on there. And as you say, it was kind of not a brilliant mistake to make going in, like touching with Abby there, and she's really going to need to up her game in the second half of the season. I think it's just there's not much to say. It's just there's not a lot of good news, unfortunately. I'm trying to find a positive spin, but there isn't one at the moment. My PR doctoring skills are lacking today.
I think you're right. There's just little in the way of good news. And then just final things. It seems like there's just not that much. As we like to talk F1, but there's not a lot of all to talk about this time. But Fabian Volvend, bit unfortunate that she had a bit of an issue with losing her front wing when she was battling. I think she got around the outside and turn one, lap one, and then had a right clattering over the curbs. Front wing fell off. She, to me, has been one of the stars of the season, talking away from the ones I expected to see up at the top, like Chadwick, Visser, who got points again. Let's give a shout out to her. But Volvend, yeah, really unfortunate. I thought she ended up having to retire the car in a race like this, which was without any sort of safety car. There's just no chance of getting any points. So, bit disappointing.
Her qualifying wasn't particularly on fire either, if I'm remembering correctly.
No, there's quite a few of the cars or quite a few of the drivers that had struggled this time round, and this is again was maybe exaggerating the points difference. We talk about the points between the 3rd and 7th place, but that's 37 points, Nerea Marti, and Alice Powell at 72 points. That's a significant gap. So yeah, I think at this point, halfway through the championship, great that there's 1 point between Chadwick and Powell, but there's nobody else in this championship fight, is Jacob?
I think, but yeah, those two that you mentioned there, Chadwick and Powell, will be one of those two will be the champion. I'm going to get off the fence and say I think that with her experience with her 2019, like you say, she won 2019. I think she's going to win again this year, and everyone else below that, and it's going to be an absolute great fight, isn't it, for third place? I think that Volland might sort of come up through for third place there, but certainly those top two are going to be unmatched. You can't match them, and they're going to zoom off into the distance.
Like they have at the last two races, indeed. Well, I don't think there's much more really to say, so let's maybe just go straight into the top three and bottom three drivers. Thiemo, do you want to go through your top three?
Sure thing. No surprises for the first two. Jamie Chadwick, absolute domination, and Nerea Marti for just absolutely blinding weekend. Very well played by her. And then if my third choice, I'll pick Marta Garcia because she got up and she got into some decent points, which she needed. I felt like she's had a bit of bad luck and she's brought herself up a bit. And while she's not quite where we're hoping she would be, she's made some signs of improvement. So that's good enough for me this week.
Yeah, I think it's good to see her. Actually, she looked so confident in 2019. I don't know what's happened so far in 2021, but good to see her score some points at last. Jacob, how about yourself? Your top three of W Series drivers?
The first two that Thiemo mentioned there, I'm going to have to copy, I'm afraid. Obviously, Chadwick, we don't need to say any much more about her. Nerea Marti as well, great to see her on the podium and putting herself into that fight for third place. And I've chosen Visser as my third driver there. I think she got her best points finish of the season. Nice consistent points finish there in 5th place. Yeah, and it was great to see. Good shout out to her there.
Yeah, good to see. I don't think she's going to be particularly happy with how the season's gone so far after being so close in 2019. But good to see her getting, another haul of points after a struggle so far. And my top three, it's no disrespect to Alice Powell, but Jamie Chadwick won the race, so I can't look past her. And Nerea Marti for getting that first podium piece of silverware. So very exciting to see. And just for that overtake, like I said, it's one of my overtakes I saw. One of the best overtakes I saw at the Hungaroring. So Emma Kimberley gets that for overtaking where cars don't usually overtake. And for my bottom three, unfortunately, I have to go to Sabre Cook again for another disastrous qualifying session. She makes up places in the race, but when you're starting so far back, it's always going to be difficult to do anything significant. Sarah Moore, as we touched on during the podcast, she had a bit of a difficult weekend, especially showing how much promise she showed earlier in the season. And my third driver is Miki Koyama for reasons we mentioned before, but in particular having such a messy overtake. And I was quite surprised that there wasn't any intervention when you're making contact when running down that second little straight and hitting the rear end of a fellow competitor. Let's go back to you, Thiemo, for your bottom three drivers.
Well, like yourself, I'm going to have to copy you and say Sarah Moore. Just a bad weekend, unfortunately, for her. Hopefully, it was just a one-off blip and she can be back to her normal self when we go racing again. As for the other two, I'm going to be a little bit harsh, but, I do that occasionally. So Fabian Roland is on the list just because because we're all expecting so much from her this weekend after Silverstone, and then it didn't work out in the end, so a bit of tough love there. And then third on my list, one from Jacob's top three, which is a little bit awkward, but again, tough love, so here we go. Weitske-Visser, because I was expecting a bit more from her this weekend, and decent result for her, but she should have really been able to get past Sidorkova, and considering she's quite a bit more experienced than her, so a bit surprising there, so bottom three for me.
Jacob, do you want to be the grumpy old man and leave with your bottom three before we call the show?
I'm going to, there's going to be a few names that have cropped up before from you guys. Sabre Cook, I think she's the only driver, or the only full-time driver who's appeared in all 4 rounds so far, not to score a point. She's really disappointed so far this season. The qualifying not helping her once again. Van Von, obviously, with the only retirement of the race, losing your front wing is not ideal around the Hungaroring. You're certainly not going to make up any place without a safety car, and certainly not ideal when you're in the fight for third place either. And the third driver I'm going to choose S4. She had a fantastic start to the season, didn't she? Really surprising there with second place in the first race in Austria. But just not good this weekend, not really anywhere, and certainly needs to show a bit more in Spa.
Yeah, it's not been ideal for several of the drivers, but Sarah Moore started up high, I think a little bit lower, and so making the bottom three. Yeah, so I understand those. But we have now a summer break. Which again, like I say, is a bit weird to have a summer break after only 4 races in, which felt like it just started, didn't it? But back to race at Spa for a double header before they head off to Zandvoort, and then it's a long time before hitting Circuit of Americas on the 23rd of October, and then finally at Mexico. So that's another double header. So 2 double headers left, and a little bit more of a split in the championship, but got a little while before we talk all about W Series. So in the meantime, where can people find your work, Thiemo?
You can find me here on GP Grandstand, of course. You can also go and find me over on Drive on Instagram and search On The Curbs on YouTube to find my interviews with various motorsport people.
Have a look out for that. They'll be on the notes below if you're watching on YouTube, and in the show notes if you're listening on podcasts. And Jacob, where can you find your work?
You can find me here every week on GP Grandstand and over to Jacob Phillips team.
And same again for that. If you want those links, have a look in the show notes or the description below. And for myself, you can find my writing on gpgrandstand.com and fortlock.com. And for my satire F1 news, search the F1 week that was on YouTube. And of course, I'm on Grand Prix Grandstand TV and the gpgrandstand.com website. Thank you for listening to us talking F1 about the W Series. Keep your eyes peeled for the next episode where you can see us talking F1 all over again.